we had a single fatal with a near, it was almost a double fatal auto pedestrian, two little girls. One was killed and one was seriously injured. And I knew exactly who to send to the hospital. The officer on my squad that was the best for this situation, and I knew who was going to handle the DUI because it was a hit and run. We tracked the car down, found the driver, DUI evaluation, DUI drugs evaluation. So it was a DRE call,
Yep.
and just having those people on board, that's, you can't beat that. And there's nothing in my pension that has ever matched that feeling. So
San Diego 911 emergency. You need to come right away. There's a man with a gun and it's loaded. Receiving emergency signal from
4 George, 1141. We got a white female down. We need paramedics, code please.
all available units. Roll code that way.
welcome to the De-Escalation Conversations podcast. With me today is a guy that, every time I see Michael Warren, every time I see him, I get this big, like, shitting grin on my face. And Michael, you have such positive energy, and it comes across. I literally have not seen you not just being okay, we're here, we're doing good, and you've been in some stressful situations. When I've seen you, you've been juggling a lot of stuff at like the ILETA, the International Law Enforcement Educators Trainers Association, that we both belong to, and we love going to those conferences. And you're juggling 27 different balls, spinning 13 plates, and trying not to drop anything, and yet you're there with just your usual Michael Warren grin. And folks, if you don't know Michael, you're going to enjoy this episode. He's a retired law enforcement officer from Michigan with 24 years of experience. He holds multiple degrees. He's also, as you can tell by his bookshelf behind him, an avid reader. He currently serves with Virtual Academy, making sure that partner success is reached. And I don't know exactly what that means, but Michael, I'm sure you'll tell us. Welcome to the show, brother.
I appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you, and you have like the perfect podcast voice too, or radio voice, or I always joke I have a face for radio.
Yeah,
You have a face
same here.
and a voice for YouTube, so you're styling. So
Well, it's the beard. The people like beards nowadays, so I'm good right now.
exactly, and you got the shaved head, so you look like a
Huh?
tough guy, and So all right, well, let's jump into this stuff. You and I, you spent 24 years as a cop in Michigan. I was born and raised in Michigan, but I left home at 17. But I was raised at the firehouse. My dad was fire chief. My brothers were junior firefighters. And I distinctly remember we had two Oakland County sheriff's deputies that were always hanging out at the firehouse with us when they weren't handling calls. And the stories that I grew up with. Now, I had no intention of becoming a cop. I just wanted to be a firefighter, but I loved hearing these deputy stories. And these guys were just true cowboys. They were the only two deputies in our part of the county. It's a huge county. And so I've always had that respect and admiration for law enforcement. And you were a cop in my home state. So how did you make that transition? Because I've told listeners before how I made the transition from being a firefighter to a cop. But tell me about where you grew up and what that was like and what led you into being in law enforcement.
It's kind of funny because I was born and mostly raised in Georgia, and I started on the law enforcement trajectory very early on. My grandpa was a Georgia State Patrolman for 30 years. His
Wow.
brother, my great uncle, was a sheriff, an actual sheriff in Twiggs County, Georgia. I believe it was for 48 continuous years. And so law enforcement has been a part of my life as long as I've been alive. But what really started me, honestly, what really started me down the path was when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. My grandpa brought home his car
Mm.
and he let me play with the lights and sirens. And brother, I was hooked. And I cannot remember a point in my life outside a desire to be in the military of wanting to do anything else.
Mm.
And so I've been very blessed to have lived my childhood dream. And there's not a lot of people that necessarily get to say that.
Yeah. So how did Georgia transplant end up in Michigan?
Yeah, well, I went primarily raised in Georgia, but then I went to high school and college in Virginia. My dad was an electrician, so we moved quite a bit when I was a kid. But when I graduated with my bachelor's degree, there weren't a whole lot of jobs in my area. And there happened to be jobs in Michigan, and to be honest, those jobs had pensions, and there's a lot to be said for that. And so I came up here and got on with my agency, and I was again, very blessed to spend my entire career with one agency,
Wow.
which, again, you look around, there's not a lot of people left that can say that anymore. They start off someplace and then make a move. I was very fortunate in that respect.
Yeah, and I was the same way with San Diego PD. I was with, other than military police, I was with San Diego PD the vast majority of my 30 years in law enforcement, and I saw exactly what you're talking about. I saw officers shift, and sometimes it's because they're moving out of state, and they wanted to get their family to a different state out of California, and I totally understood that, and I looked at that myself. But there are other officers who went from agency to agency, or even sometimes just making one shift. And that grass looking greener on the other side is a powerful draw, especially when there's pay or benefit differences, a difference in the pension or whatever else. But making that transition, I'm glad I didn't. For me, it's the right move for some officers, but in deputies. But so tell me about your career. You landed in this agency in Central Michigan, kind of midway. I'm being really generalistic here, midway between Ann Arbor and Detroit. And tell me, what kind of assignments did you work? What was your career like?
Well, actually, when I first started there, I started off in dispatch. And I will be honest with you, I think if I were ever made chief of all police, across the country, I think that I would have people that want to be in this career serve a stint in corrections and a stint in dispatch, simply because it gives you a different perspective. You learn a different way of talking to people. You really do uh, get some experience that you can't get as a sworn officer. So I started up there, then they sent me to the academy, and I was a road patrol officer. I was very fortunate in my career. I got to serve as a bike officer for a while. I was an FTO, was an accident investigator, but I think that what really sent me down this road of trying to be a professional police officer was when I received an assignment to work in our detective section.
Mm.
And I can remember going out to my very first scene, and it wasn't a big scene, it was a B&E scene, right? And I'm out there, and I get there, and I realize I don't know how to put the film properly into the camera. Yeah, because back then, we still used film. It wasn't
35
digital for
millimeter,
that.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So it's like, Mike, if you're going to be doing this, if you're going to be the one that gets called out when something really needs to be documented, if you need to, they need specialization, then you probably should be some type of a specialist, some type of subject matter expert. But I was also probably the most fun time in my career was I was assigned to DEA Detroit as a task force officer for a few years, and that was an absolute blast. But as with just about everything that's a lot of fun, good things must come to an end. I got promoted to sergeant. I served as a road patrol sergeant. I became the training and standards sergeant, and I ended my career as the primary use of force instructor for the agency. I taught just about everything. I coordinated most of that, the high risk, high liability type of event training. And it was fantastic. And as my buddy put it, my buddy Rick Mitchell put it, you got a front row seat to the greatest show on earth.
Yeah, no kidding, right? And now being retired, is there sometimes that you see a patrol car or even a fire truck, the ambulance going by code, and you're like, What's going on?
Uh, I cannot tell you. I actually live near a fire department. And every time those bad boys start up, I'm sitting there going, okay, let's see here. All right, that sounds like the engine. Okay, they're rolling out the squad too. All right, it's got to be something pretty good. And I'm like, man, that feeling, because you know what it's like, dude, when you're sitting there and you got the lights and sirens going and you're coming up to an intersection and everybody stops for you. The one of the rare times where people are paying attention,
Yeah.
everybody's paying attention. Man, there's no adrenaline rush like that right there.
Yeah. Yeah, there's good stuff for the job. There's no doubt that there's those intrinsic rewards.
Yes.
You got the pension, the extrinsic, the external rewards of, you know, quite honestly, some safety and security. And I learned that benefit of having that paycheck coming in when I was in the military. Spending 9 years in Navy on submarines. It was nice. It wasn't a big paycheck by any means, but it was regular and consistent. And I knew a lot of my friends that, they talk about getting laid off or being fired or, any number of things, downsizing. And I'm like, oh, okay, I don't have to worry about that. That's nice. And, with the pension, that extrinsic
Yes.
reward of having that safety, that security is nice. But at the same time, there's just nothing that beats those intrinsic rewards of whether it's a call that you go to that
Yes.
you are the absolute right person to be there, or as an accident reconstructionist, I know that both as an officer and as a supervisor at traffic division, there were a couple times that the team that I worked with showing up, I knew exactly which set of skills were needed for a particular thing. I can still remember we had a single fatal with it was almost a double fatal auto pedestrian, two little girls. One was killed and one was seriously injured. And I knew exactly who to send to the hospital. The officer on my squad that was the best for this situation, and I knew who was going to handle the DUI because it was a hit and run. We tracked a car down, found the driver, DUI evaluation, DUI drugs evaluation. So it was a DRE call,
Yep.
and just having those people on board, that's you can't beat that. And there's nothing in my pension that has ever matched that feeling. So yeah.
But it's this whole concept that I struggle with right now about the concept of well-rounded officers. And,
Tell me more.
so well-rounded officers, when we talk about it a lot in this profession now, what we're talking about is a jack of all trades. And officers certainly need to be able to do the breadth of their job.
Mhm.
But I think the strongest thing is what you just talked about there, and those are well-rounded teams where we can utilize people's strengths and their passions within the team in order to accomplish the mission. And just like that, when you were telling the story, you could see the excitement when you realize that, hey, I know who to put here and I know who to put there. And you see this thing just come together and it's seamless and it just goes like it's supposed to go. That right there, especially if you're a supervisor, what a feeling that is. Watching your people succeed because they're prepared properly.
Well, and watching them step up,
Oh yeah.
you get the text message, "Hey Sarge, would you like me to da da da?" Or "Hey Sarge, I ran the plate. I ran the plate. I've already pulled up parking citations for this vehicle. I've already pulled up, I created this course when I went through my California Postmaster Instructor program. I created this course called Verifying Suspect Identity. And the scenario that all 3 days was built around is you take a license plate and you trace it all the way through to who pays the water bill where they live. Because if they're paying the water bill, they live there.
Right.
The electric bill, maybe not. But in finding out that information is hard. But water bill, you find the water bill, guaranteed nobody's paying the water bill for somebody else. Not at least not out in California.
Exactly.
And so the folks that worked with me, have them say, hey, I've got this and this and this. And I didn't have to ask them to do it. They heard the call, they knew what was going on, and they're already, I'm not saying they were driving while they were typing on their computers, but or
Yeah.
they're on the phone with dispatch and they're taking care of business and they're feeding everybody else on the team information. There is just that's just that's love right there.
I always enjoyed it when there, I mean, let's be honest with each other. There are certain calls that each and every officer really dislikes,
Oh,
really dislikes.
yeah.
And perhaps it's because they're not good at it or whatever. But when your team is functioning at such a level and they know each other to such an intimate detail that if they hear one of their partners dispatched on a call that they know is not their strong suit, or they know that they really don't like, or maybe they just know what's going on at home and they know that
Mm,
right there, that one might go sideways if they're on it, and hearing them step up and say, hey, radio, I'll take that one.
yeah.
That right there, that's when you know that you've gone beyond being a team and now you're a family. And that family is so powerful when it's harnessed and it's moving towards the mission of the unit and for the department.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So let me ask you this. You have talked before, speaking of well-rounded officers and well-performing teams and knowing each other. There's another factor that I love the term that you've used before. It's culture of speed. And since this is the De-Escalation Conversations podcast, we talk a lot about de-escalation, and everybody who has listened to us for more than 7.5 seconds know I'm all about 360. It's about, you bring what happened at home last night, you bring that to work with you in the morning, or vice versa. What happened at work last night, you're taking home in the morning. And so what's this impact that you think that the culture of speed has had on de-escalation and in policing in general?
Well, I'm going to give some credit here to my former working partner and our fellow ILETA member, John Bostain. He and I were working on a course, and he starts bringing up this idea. And it's from the training perspective that are we cultivating a culture of speed from a training perspective?
Mm.
And it's like, when you go to emergency vehicle training, who gets the award? It's not the person who was necessarily the safest. It was the person who completed the course the quickest. And it was such a fascinating thing to me that I started looking into it more. And John was right. It's not just in training that we're cultivating this culture of speed. So think about this right here. We enjoy and look for metrics in law enforcement. And I'm not opposed to them. We need certain things to measure. All right. But let's go back to dispatch for a second. So dispatch, oftentimes in agencies, what they are measured on is how quickly they receive a call, they input the data, and get a car on the way. Okay. And the problem with that is that I am rewarding people for getting less information.
100%.
And so think about that. In fact, I think there was an article that just came out on an ambush attack last year, or maybe it was the year before, where the officers were never informed that there was a gun.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think about that, when all I care about is being able to take the information, type it into the to CAD system as quickly as possible, and then dispatch it. And it's funny on the dispatching side, oftentimes if a dispatcher who's worked for any length of time, even if they recognize that a district car is on something and they're going to be clearing soon, because they know that timer is running, they will oftentimes dispatch somebody out of district. And that
Mm.
causes problems right there, because now, hey, you listen, the timer has stopped on dispatch. Now we talk about response times. Okay. Well, when you dispatch somebody out of district, the studies show that you're increasing the response times of the officer substantially. So now it looks bad on the officer side. So that's one of the ways that I think that we're cultivating a culture of speed. But how about this one right here? So many agencies are short-staffed right now, and we've got calls. The calls haven't decreased in volume.
No, they've
What happened?
increased.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So what are sergeants doing on the radio now when an officer's out there on a call? Oftentimes you'll hear the sergeant, "Hey, you going to be clearing soon? You going to be clearing soon? We've got calls holding." And now instead of handling a call perhaps as thoroughly or as appropriately as we did before, we take just enough information to be able to fill out a report and we clear. So when you talk about it in terms of de-escalation, uh, in most cases, de-escalation is a process. And processes take time. And you know how it is, man. When you supervise a traffic unit, right? If there's an accident investigation, you got to start shutting down roadways. Well, what happens with the supervisors that are working that day? How much longer? How much longer is the road going to be closed? And that's the focus instead of doing that thorough investigation that's going to allow for appropriate charges to be filed. And that's what I mean by the culture of speed there, if that makes sense to you.
Oh, it makes total sense. And so I did a talk one time, and I talked about how balance is a myth. And I talked about how it almost cost me my life. Now you hear about work-life balance. So in this case, speed safety balance, information versus KPIs, key performance indicators, metrics, whatever you want to call them, balance. And what I described in this talk was, you should really view it more as a harmony of an orchestra. Because when the flutes are playing and the woodwinds and the percussion and the brass, and they're all playing at different times, there's never just one thing happening. There's not one weight on one end of the scale and one weight on the other end of the scale. You know, people look at, oh, work-life balance, got to make sure that you have it. And no, it's a harmony. Sometimes there's a give, sometimes there's a take. In the same way, you were talking about, doing an accident scene. I remember a supervisor yelling at me in public because he was frustrated that the processing of the scene was taking so long. And it was a fatal. I'm like, you know what? Yeah, there's a lot of people that are inconvenienced out here. I get that, because they're having to reroute and there's traffic control, and we call them RSVPs, retired senior volunteer patrol volunteers that come in and help with traffic control. And yeah, it takes this long. And if you knew anything about accident investigation, if you knew anything about it, you would understand what's required. Because once we clear this scene, there's no coming back tomorrow.
Yeah, it's one shot.
Yeah, you can paint it all you want, but it's not going to be the same. We're going to miss evidence. And I've had that happen at crime scene investigations. And yet there is also, okay, are we taking too long? Is it really necessary that we do all of this stuff? Maybe not. And there's that's where that experience comes in, of sitting on the stand in a witness stand in court a few times and getting torn apart because you didn't collect the evidence. And what are you going to say? Oh, I didn't collect the evidence because some supervisor was breathing down my neck and wanted to open the roadway up, or the crime scene up, or wanted to get everybody home because we were incurring overtime. So yeah, there's that culture speak. First of all, I do want to say this. I want to pause everything. I want to pause everything and say this. You mispronounced John Bostain's name. I don't know if you know this or not.
Uh-oh.
But it's John Bostain. Angels sing, light rays shine down from heaven, the clouds part. Anytime John's around, that's just my opinion. John Bostain is training company command presence is amazing. He's an amazing man and amazing lady. So yeah, so it's John Bostic. Just so all the listeners are clear on that.
Yeah, but if any of your listeners know who he is, they understand exactly what you're saying right now.
100%. And in fact, we're doing a panel discussion on de-escalation at the 2024 ILETA conference, and John has agreed to be on that panel.
Awesome.
And when Harvey Hedden, the executive director of ILETA, was talking to me about me leading this panel, he's like, "Who do you want on it?" And I'm like, "Oh, I've got like 3 people right now." Bam, bam, bam. And John was in that top 3. I'm like,
absolutely.
I don't care. I don't even want to call him. I want to get somebody else who's like he's buying steak dinners for that I want them to ask, because I don't want there to be any hesitation on his part. And there wasn't. He was just like, "Yeah, oh, yeah, heck, I'll do it." So he's very, very generous with his time and his knowledge and his wisdom, which is pretty vast. So anyway, I just wanted to give John some kudos there because he deserves it. So let's get back to you. And I want to touch on something that you just said, because you talked about the report that came out on that ambush. And I want to draw a quick parallel. In my friend Gordon Graham, everybody knows Gordon, longtime law enforcement trainer. He's talked repeatedly about the difference between when a firefighter is killed in the line of duty and a police officer is killed in the line of duty. All the stops, huge investigations for firefighters, and it doesn't happen with cops. And I want to draw a quick parallel. There's a guy, you may or may not have heard of him. His name is Keegan Gill, Gill, F-18 pilot. And the F-18, multi-million-dollar aircraft. He had to eject from his aircraft literally split seconds before it crashed. He was at 9.95 Mach. He was at the speed of sound when he ejected. He is the number one person, like when I say number one person, he is the pilot who has ejected at the highest speed ever and survived. And there's a podcast called Cleared Hot, great podcast. And he was interviewed on it recently, and I was listening to it, and he was talking about the investigation that happened after the crash. Now, some people might go, "Hey, it's a multi-million-dollar military aircraft that basically vaporized when it hit the water." And the Navy tore every aspect of Keegan's life apart. They wanted to know what he ate for breakfast, how much sleep he had gotten. And these are some of the questions that are asked during an OIS, officer involved shooting. I know because being in 2 fatal OISs during my career, I've been asked these questions. And yet they were not at the depth. Somebody is dead, whether it's a civilian or an officer. And yet there's surface level questions that we get asked. And that kind of goes back to that, I think, a little bit of the culture of speed that we were just talking about that. And I don't know what your experience is in the sense of, or what your thoughts are on that, what we should be doing when we look at situations for both. And I'm going to expand this a little bit, not just an officer being killed or injured, but on the de-escalation situations where we look at it a little bit deeper. Is that too much? Is that weighing things down too much?
Well, one of the things that I'll answer it this way. One of the things that I think that we struggle with in our profession today is that we often make determinations based upon outcome rather than process. And when you talk about that shallow look at thing, I think that's when we start looking at the outcome rather than the decisions that were made along the way, and there was an outcome that resulted. Because I believe, and throw it out there. One of the best debriefs I ever heard was on the Pulse nightclub shooting by one of the people that was there, and he wasn't a very politically correct guy, and he kind of goes like this. He goes, "Listen," he goes, "in law enforcement, we need to remember this, that sometimes you can fuck everything up and things end up okay. But there are other times where you can do everything right and things end up fucked up." And so we have to remember that there are variables outside of our control at these scenes. And I'll be very blunt with you on this right here. I think that there are times when we reward officers for actions taken in the name of quote unquote de-escalation. Okay. That they should not be rewarded for, they should be punished for. And the reality is the only reason that things turned out okay was they got lucky. And getting lucky isn't repeatable. It's not something that we can say, hey, this right here is a model that we should use in our agency for dealing with these type things. And I just, when we do that, when we give somebody a reward, an award for something, we are saying that this is activity. These are behaviors that you should try to emulate and repeat because this is what we value. And we get that when we look at it in that very shallow way.
100%. And the phrase God looks after fools and drunks.
Yes. Yes.
And there's, yeah, focusing on the outcome only. Well, everything turned out okay. So we probably don't need to do a debrief on this one. Yeah, sure, we do. Absolutely, we do. Absolutely, we do. All right. Keep going. Keep going.
I just think that when things turn out okay and we don't do that deep dive, then we miss opportunities to ensure future success for our people. Okay, you made these choices and they were solid choices and they led to a good outcome. Where did you learn that? Was that from our training? Was that something that you learned elsewhere? Is it something we need to include in our training? And we just focus so narrowly on things. And then when the next one ends up jacked up, we're almost perplexed. But well, why did that one work out okay and this one didn't? And we can't answer that question because we didn't do those deep dives like you were talking about.
Yeah, and the deep dive isn't for the things that went right. We focus almost solely on the things that went wrong. And it's not to focus on the things that went right so we can pat each other on the back and feel good about ourselves and, woo, let's give a participation trophy kind of feeling. What we should be doing is exactly what you just said. Where did you learn that? And or why did you make that choice? Because as a supervisor, if I have the opportunity to reinforce why somebody made that choice, now we have a transferable skill. Yes. Because we might not be facing somebody who has a screwdriver and is threatening suicide or a jumper, or it could be a completely different situation. But these transferable skills from call to call to call, because each call is so drastically different, even though it looks on the surface to be the same. Having built those transferable skills is critical, and especially when you're dealing. I'll give you a quick example. Southern Division, when I was down there as a supervisor, 50% of the patrol officers had less than 2 years experience. 50% had less than 2 years, which means we're talking 7 seconds to 1 year, 364 days. And a lot of them are closer to the 7-second mark. If you don't build those transferable skills, and I'm not even saying that you have to be a supervisor, it's not the leadership by title or position or rank. It's how are you going to help your squad mate who's brand new make sure, rather than just making them feel like crap because they're the F and G, can you actually help build their skill set?
Well, wait, we use the phrase based on my training and experience a lot in law enforcement, but that is probably best left to people that have both a lot of training and a lot of experience. So what can we do as squad mates, as first line supervisors to accelerate those things? And this is what little soapbox here. It bothers me how so many frontline, first line supervisors give away their influence when it comes to training to the training unit. If you want to influence your people's behavior, that is done through training. And the studies show that the micro learning, the taking the times of opportunity, um, taking those times and intentionally laser focus trying to instill training and experience in our people, that is most meaningful. But so many people say, well, I'm not a trainer. He'll get that in mandatory training, and they give that away instead of trying to do that themselves. And yet they're the ones that have to do the investigation when they muck things up. They're the ones that have to ask them, well, why did you do that? And then are perplexed when they get into, well, I don't know. And I just wish we did a better, more ongoing, intentional job of trying to do that regularly.
Yeah, and I spoke earlier about Gordon Graham. He called it SROVT, solid, realistic, ongoing, verifiable training. SROVT.
Absolutely.
And one of the key things, if you look at anything in life, going to being in good health, what's it going to take? Consistently doing certain things like having some exercise, at a bare minimum, basic movement, and a decent diet. Doesn't have to be perfect, but what's consistent?
Yes.
And that ongoing training that Gordon talks about, I use a different. It's the same thing. It's saying the same thing. It's just using different word. Is consistent. Can you consistently? And you use term micro learning, which I absolutely love. Micro learning, nano learning, whatever the new catchphrase is for it. The bottom line is you don't need to back up the dump truck and dump out 5 yards of knowledge on somebody. You can just talk about one little thing. And what we focus on ends up growing. If we take a little house plant and we shove it in the corner, we don't feed it, we don't water it, we ignore it, that house plant's going to die. And it is the same thing with brains on anybody. If you just ignore it, it's not going to flourish. There's no way. But the plant that's in the center island in your kitchen, where everybody's gathered around, that gets focused on, and that's going to grow. That's going to look good. It's going to be healthy. It's the same way with your officers, your deputies, dispatchers. It doesn't matter who it is that we're talking about when it comes to this SROVT, the solid, realistic, ongoing, verifiable training.
Well, let me run this by you here, and this will make some people angry, but that's okay. I'm a big believer that quality, realistic policies protect the officer and the agency. Okay. But here's the reality of it. If you want a good measure of who the agency is trying to protect, take a look at their activities over a year. In which of these activities is more time invested? Writing policies or writing curriculum? Writing policies or designing training? Because the policy, it frames the boundaries in which I can act. Training actually helps me develop the responses and how I'm going to act. And if it's done properly, it keeps me within those boundaries. But if the focus in an agency is primarily on the policies, then that's to protect the agency. If we properly develop the training and deliver it appropriately using a variety of techniques, micro learning, you know, force on force, reality-based training, all those things, if we do it properly, it protects the agency and the end user. And that's a win-win. And so we'll talk about de-escalation for a second. You know, duty to intervene, because that's just another way of saying de-escalating my officers and getting them out of there.
Yeah.
You know, the first time that our people actually have to intervene shouldn't be out there on the street when things are going completely sideways.
Yeah.
You know, that should be part of our training because it's very difficult. I mean, we all saw the video out of Florida from, what was it, last year, where the female officer tried to intervene with her sergeant and she got grabbed around the neck. You know, those type things right there, man, we can mitigate. We can never really eliminate, but we can mitigate a lot of the negative parts of that if it's incorporated in our training, as you said, on an ongoing basis.
Yeah. And I can't count the number of times. And I appreciated every single one of them when I got a tap on the shoulder. And this was before, the duty to intervene was ever, I was, before it was a term. You hear cops talk about, we were doing de-escalation for de-escalation was cool. Of course we were. We were doing duty to intervene before duty to intervene was cool, before it was even called that. That was just something that you always did, that tap on the shoulder of, hey, Kerry, we're good here. Kerry, are you good?
Mhm.
Yeah or no. Or my favorite phrase, my contact. Practicing contact and cover. When you saw your partner, it wasn't going well, you caught their attention, my contact. And your partner's like, okay. It's like I don't watch it. I don't know the rules, but tag team wrestling is kind of what it feels like.
Yes.
WWE, and tap somebody, you're out, I'm in, my contact. And that's all it takes is those two words.
Yep.
And we would avoid so many problems. In the that video out of Florida, that sergeant was in full on survival. We talk about executive state and survival state, and you've heard me talk about this before. And that's where there ought to be that, you always, I remember growing up watching Flintstones. He had the devil and the angel on different shoulders, right?
Yep.
Coach and the critic. And you don't listen to the critic, you listen to the coach on your shoulder. And everybody should have a coach, 100%. And in being able to go, I'm out, your contact, yep. And being able to not let pride and ego overrule you there.
Absolutely. And you said something interesting just a minute ago. Yeah, you know what? We've been doing de-escalation for years. And you're right. But I think part of becoming a professional and part of us really showing that we're a profession is putting names to what we do.
Mhm.
Because I love Brian Willis, and he talks about things, it's articulated unconscious competence. It gets us where we need to be, doing the right thing and being able to explain it. And I was at a class last week, one of the best classes I've been to, and it's stuff that a lot of the stuff I knew, but being able to put terminology to it
Yes.
that is explainable and understandable really is what takes our profession to a new level, in my opinion.
Oh, 100%. Because I mean, how many times when you're a new officer, you ask for cover on a stop, and what's PC for the stop? Which always cracked me up. We call it PC because I guess RS, reasonable suspicion, does not roll off the tongue like PC for the stop does.
Right.
What's PC for the stop? Well, a taillight out, but he's got dope in the car. Okay, how do you know? I don't know. I don't know how we know. I just know. And there always was. You were right. How do you articulate that? Well, it was as we were driving past each other, the deer in the headlights look that I got, the stare as he tracked me over his left shoulder as we drove by each other. it's those little subtle things that your subconscious picks up, but it's hard to bring it to the conscious
Yes.
level. And there's this guy by the name of Carl Jung, famous psychologist, groundbreaking work, way ahead of his time. He said, if you don't bring your subconscious conscious, it'll rule your life and we'll call it fate.
Mhm.
And that works in so many areas, even whether it's articulation for reasonable suspicion for the stop, probable cause for the arrest, or how is it that I become a better person? It all
Yes.
works. Now I want to not really shift gears, but I want to shift gears just a little bit because you've talked about thinking about de-escalation only in terms of potential use of force situations. And early on in your career, you responded to a really tough call. And I'd like you to tell me a little bit more about that story. In fact, just tell me the story.
This is one of those things where it was something that I didn't anticipate having as big an impact on me as it did. And when it did, it was a really big aha moment. And I can remember I was actually sitting in the squad room at the station and I hear an officer dispatched on a death investigation, possible suicide. And they didn't send a backup. And we always send backup on that right there. And so I jumped on the radio and said, radio, I can back on that. And I was very young in my career, and I remember rolling up on scene, and I make the mistake that many young officers do. I pulled up too close to the residence, and instead of being able to wait for backup, I was approached by a young man because he was the son of the resident, and he hadn't heard from his mom, and he had come over to check on her, and he had found her. And
Mm.
so obviously he's very upset. And so it's one of those things where at the time I said, well, he's seen me. I gotta go do what I gotta do, right? And so I can remember going down in the basement of this house and this lady, and I was going to say older lady, but the truth be told, I'm probably the same age as the lady is now, but she's hanging from a rafter from a beam in the basement. And so, confirmed death and that there's no chance of bringing her back. And I go back up and the backup officer gets there. And Kerry, I know you've seen it multiple times in your career where someone, and this is one of the terms, the phrases that I heard last week that just put it so much better than what I could. People that are overwhelmed by emotions are overcome by events. And this right here, you could use either of those phrases. This young man is beside himself. I mean, he's to put it clinical terms, he was a basket case. And as young as I was, and as inexperienced and as unprepared as I was, sit there and just start talking to him and asking him questions and giving him a chance to talk about whatever he wants. And I could ask a question, and even if it wasn't related to if his answer wasn't related to my question, it was okay, because the longer we talked, the farther he came down. And I mean, because at these scenes, we can't clear the scene. We've got to wait for the detective to get there. Then we got to wait for the medical examiner to get there. You're not there for a short period of time. And to me, it felt like an eternity.
I bet.
And but it's after it was over with, I was exhausted. Not from any physical exertion, but from being that intent on somebody for that long of a period. And I can remember it to this day. I mean, his wife came, they'd been married for a short time. And I can remember before his wife got there, he's telling me, my wife just graduated from law school. And he goes, how am I going to handle being happy for her and celebrating this accomplishment when I've got to bury my mom and I've got to plan this funeral and everything? I said, it's something you probably can't handle by yourself, but because your wife certainly deserves to be celebrated. This is a huge thing that's going to impact the rest of your lives together. but you've also got, you've got this thing going on. And I didn't have the answers, man. 20 something years old. I don't have the answers, but I remember, and I still have it, a thank you card from him.
Mm.
And in the thank you card, he goes, thank you for taking the time to listen.
Yeah.
And that right there, de-escalation isn't always about use of force or using force or not using force. It's about allowing people to get to a place where they can do things appropriately. And so in this case right here, he should be upset. He just found his mom, and that's a traumatic thing. But I didn't want him to any longer be overwhelmed or overcome by something. And being willing to, and give some shout outs here to the guys from Arcadia Cognerati, Greg Williams and Brian Mayer. And I went to their class last week, and Greg says this all the time. He goes, most of the time you have to remember, most people don't want their way, they want their say. And if we're willing to allow people to have their say, that often results in a reduction or de-escalation in the event. But if we have the culture of speed where we're just trying to get people through, or if we're unwilling to let people have their say, then we're often forced into things that perhaps we don't want to be involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. And those folks over there at Arcadia, they're amazing. They got some great material. Been through some of their training, and
So good.
is so good. And piggybacking on that, we always teach everybody has the same addiction. Every single person on this planet has the same addiction, and that is the addiction to be understood. And you can expand on that is people just want one thing, which is tied into three things, which is to be seen, felt, four things: seen, felt, heard, and understood. And if you can satisfy that them feeling, if you can communicate to them that you understand the experience that they're having, you don't have to agree with it. There's a very famous kind of a cartoon video trying to explain empathy, and it gets it for first responders. It gets empathy completely wrong. Talks about climbing down into the well with somebody. And in the way I teach empathy is you do not climb down into the well. You cannot. As a first responder, as a firefighter, medic, nurse, doctor, cop, does not matter. You cannot climb into the well with every single call that you go to, every single patient you deal with, every single situation that you assist with. You can't. You'd burn out about the second time into the well. What you can do is you can throw a rope down into the well and allow them to pull themselves out, or maybe help them pull themselves out. And so you can communicate to somebody that you understand what they're going through, what they're experiencing, make them feel, and that they get to be seen, felt, heard, and understood without it takes energy from you, but it doesn't take your whole emotional being. And that's what I think gets misunderstood on this whole de-escalation thing. And the other thing too is if we're getting pressure from somebody, hey, clear the car, response times, the mayor's putting pressure on us because the response times are too long. We gotta get to that loud music call. Really? Yes. I got this son who's dealing with a suicide of his mom. Yeah, I'm not going to that loud party call. That call's gonna have to wait. So yeah, absolutely. I love your approach on this. And gosh, Michael, you have so much experience. You have so much wisdom. I appreciate you taking the time with us today to share that. And I'd love to have you back on the show. Your work, the things that you do, especially right now with your work with Virtual Academy, you're making officers safer. You're making first responders safer. So thank you for all that you did in the time that you spent with us today.
I appreciate the invitation, and I would love to sit down and talk to you again on or off recording. And hey, a shout out real quick. I think we're going to see each other here next month. We can now say that next month at ILETA. for your listeners. If you're not a member of that group and you have never attended the conference, I cannot recommend it highly enough.
I I think I talk about Ileeta every podcast.
It's a great organization.
Oh, it's fantastic. ILEETA.org. Go there, join. It's not that expensive for an association. I think we're the only association that's cheaper, but Ileeta is not expensive, and what you get out of it, just the learning lab that Brian Willis has created. Talk about Brian Willis. Brian's another one. Is Brian Willis. He's I don't know if you know this or not, but I saw him one time. Brian does not walk on water. Whatever you've heard, Brian Willis does not walk on water. He's actually about 2 inches above it. So he does not touch the water. But yeah, Brian Willis, one of my favorite people on this planet. And so yeah, Ileeta is a fantastic time. St. Louis, at least this year it is. I think it will continue there. And yeah, next month. Love it. Every March.
I can't wait.
Every March. Cannot wait either, brother. All right, listen, you take care. To our listeners, thanks for listening to the De-Escalation Conversations podcast. Be sure to check out Virtual Academy. Michael's contact information will be in the show notes. If you're driving, you shouldn't be trying to listen. Well, you should be listening. You should not be writing stuff down anyway. So just look at the show notes later. Available on all your favorite platforms, Apple, Google. Well, Google is now Google Music. They were YouTube Music. They've gone away from Google Podcasts, but we've still got Spotify, iHeartRadio. You can listen to us on all the platforms. Listeners, until next time, as always, stay safe. You found a lot of great value in this episode of the De-Escalation Conversations podcast. Please be sure to go to our website, theidea.world, THEIDEA.world. On that website, just click on the link that resonates with you most. If you're a K-12 educator, if you're a firefighter, medical services, law enforcement, flight attendants, whatever industry you're in, we have specialized training for you. So check that training out, because literally it can save your life, it can save your relationship, it can save your career. So check out theidea.world. And I'll look forward to seeing you soon. Take care. This is Kerry Mensior, and thanks for watching this episode of the De-Escalation Conversations podcast. I hope you got some great insights that you can use right away. But don't stop here. Click that video link above and keep the momentum going with another powerful episode. And hey, if you haven't already, please hit that like button and the subscribe bell so you never miss an episode. New strategies, new stories, and new ways to connect coming your way every week. See you in the next episode.